Hi, and welcome to Moreno Valley Unified School District SELPA Services Distance Learning Guidance. I'm Crystal Clark. I'm one of the elementary mild moderate program specialists for our district. This presentation's been prepared for you so that you can watch asynchronously at your leisure on your own time. There's great resources embedded within the presentation. This presentation has been shared with you, so you should have access to this presentation training materials through your email address. You're welcome to pull that presentation up and follow along as you listen, or to access it following the presentation at your leisure. Again, there's lots of links embedded within the presentation, so please be sure to follow up and access the presentation after this. We'd like to start by reminding everyone of the mission statement. Our mission statement of the Moreno Valley Unified School District is to ensure all students graduate high school prepared to successfully enter into higher education and/or pursue a viable career path. And this doesn't change even though we're teaching a little bit differently through distance learning. Our goals for our students are still the same. We'd also like to remind everyone of our 11 commitments to excellence. One of those at this time stands out for me, which is maintaining personal balance and positive mental health. Please be reminded of your physical, intellectual, social, emotional, and spiritual needs. Take time to balance your personal life. Now that we're teaching through distance learning for a little while, things may for you start to blend together between when are you at home, when are you mom, when are you a wife, when are you a husband, and when are you a teacher, or whatever roles you may be playing in your own home right now. So do your very best to maintain personal balance, and so that you'll be available for your students when they need you and for your family or other people you're with right now. Just take care of yourself. So as a reminder, hopefully you're familiar with this, but the Moreno Valley Unified School District guidelines for teachers during distance learning is lesson delivery will take place a minimum of 2 times per week, although we would like to recommend 3 times per week. You are required to only provide instruction somehow for your students 2 times per week. This may or may not be live virtual interaction. It may be something previously recorded or support materials that you've provided your students, or instructional things that you've posted either in a Google Classroom or other forums. There's also an expectation of office hours taking place a minimum of 1 time per week, although we would like to see teachers more available at least twice a week. The requirement is 1, and that is available through Zoom, Google Hangouts, Google Voice, email, Class Dojo, whatever forum you've decided to use to communicate with your parents. And so that's one of our expectations. I'd like to share this first document with you. It's called Transition to Distance Learning. This is a letter that went out about 2 weeks ago. It was embedded into a letter or an email that was sent to all district employees from Dr. Martin Rexick-Hedziora, our superintendent. This goes over our transition to distance learning for special education. And here you'll find information about IEPs, initials, triennials, timelines, communication. You may have heard about different letters being sent to parents. That's all in here outlined as an overall plan that the SELPA department has for our transition to distance learning. If you'd like to access this document, you can on your own. There's a link where you would just click here and it'll take you straight to the full document. I believe it's 2 or 3 pages long, so it's a little bit of a read. I'll leave it there for you to visit if you'd like to access it. The next document I'd like to share with you is parent letter number 1. There are 2 letters that have at this point been sent to parents. This is the first of the 2. This letter was sent to parents about a week or 2 ago, probably closer to a week and a half. And in this letter, it describes to parents that the school district will be transitioning to distance learning for special education students as well. There's a heavy emphasis in this letter to allow parents to understand that we're trying to provide instruction for their students, but we have to do what is feasible based on our current situation, adjusting and doing the best we can to support our students through distance learning. And that's outlined in this letter. Again, there's a link here on the left-hand side if you'd like to access that letter to read it for yourself. This is a copy of the second letter that has now been sent home to parents. This is an individualized letter that was developed using a matrix or using a formula, you could call it, to determine what distance learning services are going to look like for each of the students in our district. Now, as you all know, services are different on every student's IEP. They're individualized, and these letters are the same. Based on the services on the student's IEP, a formula was used to create an appropriate service that can be provided through distance learning. Parents receive this so that they have an understanding of what services we will be providing their child through distance learning. And that letter here is for you as well as a link on the left-hand side of your screen. You're welcome to follow up and read that letter if you're interested. This is a copy of wording that's used, and this is what was embedded into parent letter number 2. When you're looking at the services that each student was going to be provided, this is an outline of what those services may look like. I'll go over one example here on the screen. You can see adapted physical education. For students who receive service weekly, this is what their service may look like. For students who receive service on a monthly basis, this is what their service would look like. And for students who receive yearly services, this is what it may look like. It is important to understand, though, that if you had a student who was receiving services 4 times a month or 3 times a month, that likely was broken down to be a weekly service, because I believe for most of us, that was our intent, writing 3 times or 4 times a month. So that was taken into consideration when the services were written into the letters for the parents. If you're more interested in this letter, you'd like to see what your service may look like for your students, you're welcome to click here on the left-hand side, and that link will take you to an accessible version of this document. It goes through all the different service options that are available through IEPs. So other IEP information, I know a lot of you are eagerly anticipating some information and wanting to know what IEPs are going to look like through distance learning. So IEPs will resume on May 4th, 2020 and will be held virtually with all required team members participating and signing electronically. So, as much as we'd like to get everyone in a room like we normally do and have this personal conversation, we're not able to do that right now. Our current situation has limited us to no more than 10 people on campus and having to be at least 6 feet apart. That would make for a really awkward IEP meeting, even if we were to try. Let's not do that. We're going to be holding our IEPs virtually. There are additional trainings that are being developed and are available to show you how you can access virtual systems to hold your IEPs. There's a link further on in this presentation to a sample of how to use Zoom to conduct your IEPs. The district office will bulk update all IEPs to show a delay code 75 for school closure. For IEPs that were due between March 13th through the date schools will reopen. And at this point in time, we don't know when schools are reopening, but the state Department of Education has given us that delay code so that we're not held in fault for our IEPs that are late, especially those that between March 13th and May 4th. There was nothing we could do. Our schools were absolutely closed. Staff do simply need to just put in the date the IEP was held when you are holding your IEP starting on May 4th, whether it's late or not, and the delay code will be automatically done for you by the district office. So there's not an additional code you're responsible for entering. That will be done for you. What you are responsible for is holding your IEPs and trying to hold them on time starting on May 4th. With those team members all participating. Complete as much of the IEP as you can. You haven't seen your students at this point in recording for at least a month, probably a little bit longer than a month. So some of the information may not be as current as you'd like. We'd like you to update the annual and triennial dates to preserve the timeline and then close and affirm the IEP. So as much as you can, but we don't want any information to be a guess. We want it to be accurate. Since we cannot meet in person, we do have the flexibility in the methods of gaining parent consent and participant signatures. So IEPs can be signed in a variety of different ways. This includes scanning and emailing. So parents have the option to print and scan and email the signature page back to you. They have the option to print and mail it back to the school. They have the option to write something on a sheet of paper. For example, I agree to the contents of the IEP for my child name that was held on date. and then sign it, and they can scan that and email that back to you. They're also able to take a picture of that or of the signature page. They're able to send you a really detailed text message that agrees that they were either in participation or that they agree with the IEP that was provided. Electronic signatures are in the process of being um, pursued, but at this point in time, there is no specific electronic signature system that we're using. So we'll make do with the best we can, and hopefully we'll have more available to you soon. So when you're looking at opening the IEP, doing as much as you can, and then closing the IEP, you may be looking for some sample words to use to document what happened at that IEP. So here's a sample that you may be interested in using. The IEP team met for, and your purpose of the IEP, either annual, triennial, parent requested, which would fall under other or an amendment. However, due to school closure impacted by COVID-19, the IEP team was unable to obtain all required data to complete the meeting. This is where you're saying, we really haven't seen this student in a long time, and we don't have all the data we really need to write a legally defensible current IEP for this student. To preserve the date, the IEP team opened, closed the IEP, and took no action. The IEP meeting will be reconvened at a mutually agreeable date and time upon school reopening. Yes, this does mean that we're going to have a lot of IEPs coming up in fall or whenever schools reopen, but it's better to do that than to have inaccurate information or IEPs that we can't defend because we guesstimated on data. We'd rather have you open, do as much of the IEP as you can, and then close it and get back together once you've had access to your students again so that you can track them, find some data, and then reconvene your IEPs or continue your IEPs with current data. So IEP information, there are some, like I mentioned before, sample virtual IEP meeting platforms. If you would like to click this link, there is an instructional video on using Zoom as a virtual IEP platform. This goes all the way from creating your account, scheduling meetings, holding meetings, and accessing all of your information. There's also a copy of written instructions in doing so here, as well as a link for you. So assessments, special education assessments do not need to be conducted during school closures. Um, so we have a State Bill 117 that waives the timeline during school closure. We also have assessment timelines were paused on May 13th and will resume once schools open for students to attend. A lot of our assessments that we conduct in special education require us to sit in a particular place to take notice of students' body language or their behavior while we're assessing. And we're not able to do all of that the way we should be through distance learning. So at this point, assessment timelines are paused and they'll resume once we're able to sit and build rapport with our students and assess them in person. Timelines are paused even when distance learning is taking place. If assessment reports are completed, you can present them at an IEP meeting. Since the results were current, we want to get these presented to the IEP team for consideration. So for those of you who have conducted a triennial or conducted an initial IEP and it's complete, you are able to write up those reports if they're not done based on the information you had at the time school closed, and you're able to present an IEP. If assessments are needed or requested by parents, our 15-day timeline to provide the parent with an assessment plan begins once schools reopen and students are physically present for us to assess. Other questions that we've been receiving on our frequently asked questions database is interpreter information. Interpreters may be required for IEPs held through virtual meeting platforms. Just like IEPs when we held them in person, we do have quite a few families in our district who require the support of an interpreter to help participate more fully in the IEP or to understand what's being presented to them in the IEP. Many IEPs held during this time will be brief and will not go into technical information such as assessment information. However, an interpreter will still be needed if the parent requires one. Classified staff are being paid and can work from home. So you would check with staff members prior to the meeting to ensure they have the necessary technology to participate in your distance IEP or your virtual IEP meeting. You would continue using the same people and the same methods for interpretation that you used as before. You just won't be sitting in the same room as each other. On this screen, there's also links embedded that you're welcome to share with your translators. There's the Office of Special Education's English Spanish glossary for translators, and there's also helpful links for translators embedded. Instructional assistant information, another question that we have been getting quite a bit. Instructional assistants may be able to work with teachers through online platforms. Please remember that instructional assistants support you as your credentialed teacher. They do not typically provide classroom instruction on their own. This is true also for distance learning. They should not be holding individual meetings with students and or families. They should not be communicating student information directly with families, just like when we're in a regular classroom at a regular campus. The same rules apply when we're doing virtual distance learning. These instructional assistants are under the supervision of site administrators. You may want to follow up with your site administrator if you have questions in regard to how instructional aids may be used or if they have a plan for how they'll be used at your school site. However, this leads to group discussion. What ways can our instructional assistants be used to assist in classroom and staff during time of school closure, especially through distance learning? We're looking for ideas. If you found a creative way to repurpose your instructional aids to support you during virtual learning or distance learning, we'd love to hear those ideas so that we can share them with other teachers. If you have ideas that you're interested in sharing, feel free to put them into the frequently asked question doc that's been shared with you, and we'll distribute that information. And I'd like to thank you for joining. Moreno Valley Unified School District shines brighter because of you. This is not an easy time. This is very different than the way we were trained to teach. Most of us thought we'd be in a classroom working with our kiddos right now, and that's just not possible based on the current world situation. So please be patient with yourselves, be patient with your students and your families, but do continue to shine brighter with excellence on purpose. Thanks for joining.